A lot to get to. Canada has begun implementing billions of dollars worth of retaliatory tariffs.
On scuffed shoes? Because you know, the President of the United States said they get our shoes and then smuggle them over the border, and they scuff them so they sound old.
This
really
is
clever Canadian.
I don't know what that means, but
if it weren't.
I mean, if they look old, that's one thing. But if they look old and they sound old, you're like, oh no, there's no way they could have smuggled those shoes from America.
The tariffs worth $12.6 billion come in response to the Trump administration's steel and aluminum tariffs. A lengthy list of U.S. goods, including chocolate, beef, ketchup, yogurt, lawnmowers, maple syrup, whiskey, now will be subject to a 10 or 25% tax. In the words of Canada's foreign minister, quote, "We will not escalate and we will not back down on the dollar-for-dollar response." And China is set later this week to impose a tough 25% tariff on U.S. soybeans, in addition to raising pork duties as part of its own retaliatory tariffs on hundreds of American products worth $34 billion.
By the way, remember Harley-Davidson already moving production.
There's that. Meanwhile, General Motors says if the Trump administration imposes its threatened tariffs on car imports, it may be forced to cut American jobs, wages, and investment. This is going well. And the financial...
Well, you know, winning trade wars are easy.
Yeah,
it's easy.
Nope.
Isn't
Art
that
of
what
the
he
deal.
said?
This is the art of the deal.
Well, yeah, let me. So, Richard, I've been noticing much of the same way I started reading articles before the 2008 crash of some concerns about these trade deals causing smart capital to flee markets, to get out of markets. Smart capital is not investing in flea markets; they are fleeing markets.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. And even Scaramucci said over the weekend that he was starting to hear from his investor friends that, you know, these tariffs are starting to cause a real panic among smart money. And there's going to be consequences if he doesn't back down.
Well, we're already seeing the consequences. The markets are getting spooked by this. It's not just the direct tariffs that they retaliate tit for tat. In some cases, they do different things. The idea that the Secretary of the Treasury was surprised that foreigners, shockingly enough, would not simply, for example, put tariffs on the same products, but they would be strategic. It's a little bit like, I'm going to take your pawn, and instead they come back and take your rook.
Right.
Well, where did they get that idea? I mean, wow, I thought trade wars were supposed to be, you know, balanced.
Right.
So we're not thinking this through about our own vulnerability.
It's called a war.
It's called a war.
Donald Trump calls it a war. Exactly. They're going to fight the war back.
We're seeing asymmetrical responses, obviously, to inflict pain on us. And what's happening is, and we're seeing it with GM and everybody else, it's the costs of the inputs are going up. So whatever small number of jobs we save is going to be overwhelmed by the much larger number of jobs that are going to be lost when Americans stop buying goods that are far more expensive than they were because the costs of the raw materials and other inputs have gone up. And this is so not thought through.
Isn't this the part that should have been thought out before?
Well, everybody warned him inside the White House, except for Peter Navarro. Outside the White House, everybody warned him. And as we have been warning on this show, it's not going to be Donald Trump's billionaire friends that he brags to at Mar-a-Lago after passing tax cuts for them. They're not going to be the Americans that are going to be hurt. It's going to be the Americans that you spoke with last week in your article, people who support Donald Trump, the same people that are going to be hurt when later this year they realize that if they have pre-existing conditions or their children have pre-existing conditions, those are no longer going to be covered by their health care insurance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people do feel pretty good right now. Of course, we're still a few months out from the election. If this market pressure, economic pressure continues to grow and build, and we get closer to November and people aren't seeing those bonuses in their checks anymore. They aren't feeling the impact of the tax cut because gas prices keep spiking or costs of consumer goods keep rising. That could be a big political threat. But I think big picture here, Trump's tariff wars, his his immigration wars, everything's always cultural with Trump, right?
Right.
So you have you have these threats from foreign nations who are trying to punish the United States, taking advantage of us because we are weak. And then at the same time, you have the immigration wars going on because there are invading forces coming in to overtake and remake our culture. So this, I think all of this fits together perfectly with exactly the kind of president we knew we were getting.
We're beginning to see a pattern. To add to all this, new reporting from Axios says the White House has drafted a bill that would allow the U.S. to operate outside the rules of international trade. The draft legislation essentially abandons the framework set by the World Trade Organization without a formal withdrawal. While the United States Fair and Reciprocal Tariff Act would undoubtedly face an uphill battle on Capitol Hill because it allows the president to raise U.S. tariffs at will without congressional consent. The report comes days after Trump reportedly told government officials his desire to withdraw the U.S. from the World Trade Organization. So let's look at the pattern, Yamiche. It seems to me that, and you talk about the culture wars or the red meat issue, like, for example, the separation policy. Yamiche, the president throws out the red meat. He separates over 2,000 kids from their parents at the border. And then a couple of weeks go by and he realizes it's really bad PR, so he pulls back on it to try and clean up the mess, but then realizes it's not that easy to clean up. So now we are still sitting here with over 2,000 kids separated from their families with absolutely no word on exactly how they're going to be reunited, and concerned that some of them may never be. This seems to be a pattern for this president in terms of how he carries out his foreign policy, which is act first, throw out the red meat, and then realize it's a mess later.
Well, I think what President Trump has tried to get credit for when it comes to the separation of families is that he's someone who creates crises and then fixes those crises or attempts to fix those crises and wants credit for saying, hey, look what I did now. I'm the one that's getting these families back together. I interviewed a young boy who hasn't seen his dad for over a month, who was separated in McAllen, Texas from his dad, and that 17-year-old cried the entire interview. So, there are a lot of images of 4-year-olds, and I talked to the 17-year-old thinking, well, he's 17, he'll be a little bit more mature. Completely shattered by the fact that he doesn't know when he's going to see his father again. But when we go to this culture wars, it's about the idea that President Trump is saying, well, you have to make a decision. Are you going to choose these families who have lost their loved ones to undocumented immigrants who allegedly killed them? Those numbers are very small. Crime statistics show that undocumented immigrants are not committing crimes any more than anyone else. But there's this idea that President Trump is saying, well, there's these families that have already lost their loved ones, and then there are these immigrants that are brown that you don't really quite know, that are also crying. Which one do you feel more sympathetic for? It's the same thing with these tariffs. I talked to some Trump supporters who have said to me, even though there are programs that have helped me personally, if the president takes them away, I'll have to do my part because we need to stop these people from invading our country. So I suspect that when Trump supporters start feeling in their paychecks that these presidents' trade wars is hurting them, that they're going to be able to justify it to themselves and say, well, I have to do my part because we need to build that wall. That's what I think that people are going to say.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.